Composer Gloves here. This is another video on how to make your first song from FL 12, and we've kind of gotten these two things out of the way, the browser and the channel rack. And so let's really quick cover these global settings up here and sort of the things that you should really know about that could hedge up your way if you are not aware of them. So the first thing is, if you come over here to File, we're going to cover this right here real quick. If you come over here to File, you can go to, and you have this save as. So if you want to save it, or if you want to save it under a different name, click Save As. I've never touched Save New Version. You can open up, whoops, we don't want to do that right now. We can open up stuff, pretty self-explanatory, new file. These are your the projects you've recently worked in, and also you have import and export. Import, don't worry about it too much, especially if you're a beginner, which I'm assuming you are. And we also have this export, and you have all these different options. This is how you get your song out of FL Studios. So we're going to talk about this real fast. So again, you can hit Control R as it says right here, or you can come over to export and click WAV file or MP3 file. A WAV file will be huge, but okay, so we have our song, and you can name it and select where you want it to save it, and then you hit save. And so this menu opens up, and from here, there are a few key things you need to be aware of. You have rendering, and so it tells you what you're rendering. You have your mode, full song, or pattern. So if you're rendering out just the pattern, which is totally possible, you need to make sure that it's on pattern or full song. Most of the time it'll be full song, which is whatever's in your playlist or sequencer. And then tail, cut remainder. Don't worry about this, just leave it at cut remainder. And then the important ones are WAV and MP3. Now this has to do with bit depth, sample rate, things like that. You should be fine at 24-bit. Like, don't stress going 32. No big deal. And on the resampling, again, that's another thing. You should really look up these terms and what they do. I'll probably have videos on them eventually, but they're like whole videos on their own. And just don't worry about this too much. 256 should serve you just fine. So yeah, I mean, if you just leave things at their default setting. Now, if you're at like 16-bit, I recommend going up to 24. And if you're at like 64, you should go up to at least 128, probably 256. Another quick note, you can select WAV, you select MP3 to render out at the same time. MP3, 192 is okay, but I always do 320 just because it's an MP3. It's already being compressed a ton. What is the difference between these two? Well, WAV has huge file size, but all your entire audio is there, but it's uncompressed, which means none of the data that is your song is compressed in any sort of way. MP3 is the standard, and it's compressed a lot. And there are different kinds of compressions, and there's different ways to get what's called lossless or lossy. But again, that's a subject for another video. Just speaking out though, I just want to show you where the rendering is and the settings that you probably want. So if we go over here, you have edit, don't worry about that. Add, most of the menus in this area actually are available other places. You have patterns, which we already talked about. View, which is another place to change essentially what these buttons do. They are a little more in depth, and they give you a few more menus. Don't worry about it. Options. Okay, this is important. If you have a MIDI device and you've plugged it into your computer, it will show up here. Make sure that you have it on. Like I have my Scarletti 6x6 USB, and if I want it to work with FL Studios, I have to click Enable for it to work. Otherwise, it won't work. Beyond that, things are getting quite a bit more specific. So just don't worry about that. But if you have a MIDI controller you're dying to hook up, this is the way you can do it. Also, there's a cool feature with wireless image line remotes that is available here. Don't worry about that too much, but you can go look it up. It's actually a free app, and it acts as a MIDI controller, and you can make it work with FL Studios. Really cool. You have your audio settings. This is where you set up your audio driver. Most of the time, you're going to have Audio for all. I've never tried the FL Studio Audio. This thing's new, so I have no idea, but it's probably just another Audio driver. I know that if you have Audio for all on, and you close FL Studios, your computer will still be on Audio for all. And what an Audio driver does is basically tell the processing. This may not be technically correct, but this is how I understood it when I first learned about this stuff. It basically tells your whole computer all the audio goes to FL Studios. And now, when you go to the internet after you've closed FL Studios, suddenly none of your videos will work. None of the audio will work, and you'll be like, what the heck? Well, it's because you left it on your audio driver. So you have to come back here and change it to primary sound driver. I have a Focusrite audio interface, which is sort of like having a separate sound card, and it lets me plug in microphones and all sorts of different things. And so I would set that up here. General, don't worry about. File, we already talked about in the previous video, at least the things you should really know about. And that's pretty much that. We're going to talk about plugins and things and managing those in another video. You have this tools, again, something that is not totally necessary for beginners. So this is your volume. And among the other most important controls up here to really know about is stuff we've already kind of covered. The pattern play, this is your sequence play over here. This stops generally just about anything. So if you have a sound coming out of FL Studios and you want it to be quiet, this will usually stop it. So it'll halt reverb and things like that. This is your record. If you hit it, the options show up and you can record into various plugins. The important one is if you have a MIDI controller up, you would go notes and automation and you'd hit play and it would play a little like bar or something. You can set it in settings. And you can start playing in whatever your MIDI controller is controlling is where that information would be sent. So that's how you do that. Now, when I started out, I didn't have a MIDI controller, so it wasn't all big a deal. But when I got one, that became a big deal. So this is where you start messing with that. Now, here's your tempo setting. You drag up and down, and you can hold down Alt and click to set it back to default. I've just had it at 80 for a while, but you can alt click any setting really, and it will go back to default. So you come over here, alt click, and it sets it back to default. Easy peasy. This is your metronome. That's all you turn on to hear your metronome. Push play. You have a metronome. Whoop-de-doodle-doo. Okay, so among the other buttons we should really know is this is your MIDI controller for your keyboard. So without that on, I can no longer play notes using my typing keyboard. This is your multi-link to MIDI controller button. So if you have a MIDI controller up, like with some knobs and stuff actually on it, and you've connected it, you need to have this on when you're assigning MIDI to it. So you could click link to controller, and you'd need to have this on, and you'd move the controller, and it should make the connection. So this is what that button's for. It can be very important. And then you have this cell button, which is basically where you snap to. I covered this in the second video, but where this thing snaps to. So if I set it to cell 1/6 step, every sixth of a step in a beat. And you can see our lines are reflected by the change. It's still snapping to lines unless you go to none. Then it does not care at all where you put this thing. But this could be very annoying if it's snapping and you don't know why it's snapping to where it's snapping. It also allows you to make much more complicated rhythms. Now you have your clock here. This is your beats. So this correlates to the position of the transport in your playlist. And I have mine on minutes and seconds all the time just because I like to know how long the song is. That's just generally where I have it. You have your patterns, which we've already talked about. And then we've talked about these buttons. That's pretty much it. You have a spectrogram up here, and you can right click to change it to an oscilloscope. So you will see the audio through your oscilloscope. You can make it stereo or not. So it just shows you just one line, which is useful for analyzing things. I like to keep it on the spectrograph, which is just the spectral content of my sound. And we have a dB meter that shows us how loud our sound is. Amongst that, there are a few other things. This shows your voice count, which is like how many synthesizers you have going at a time. So if you had a synthesizer running around right now, it would tell you how many of those voices you have. Let's demonstrate that. Let's add a oscillator. And as you can see, 3. There's sort of a delay, but it's there. And we also have our CPU meter. This tells us if you're running out of processing power, essentially. So I have something called Contact, which on my laptop, before I got a beast as a computer, but it's a beast compared to my laptop, way better. I only had 8 gigs of RAM and just a whole bunch of various things. So I would easily run the CPU meter up. And when that happens, you're getting the buffer space. Okay, 101 sound RAM speech. So when you have something triggering audio, your computer has to process that audio. And now it creates it through a delay. If the delay is short enough, like within milliseconds, you will not perceive that delay. But if you have enough stuff going through, enough audio being processed, it'll fill up that delay. Now, this delay has a name. It's called a buffer. So you hit a key in and you're telling FL Studios process this sound essentially. And so it sends it through this little loop. It actually delays it very, very shortly. And because the delay is so short, the processing time is so short, it's you hit the key and the sound comes out and it's no different. But there's actually a delay. If you go to audio, you can see I have my delay at 8 milliseconds. And this was determined by the CPU, if you have multi-cores, if how much RAM you have is a big one. And RAM is just memory. So if I open up something like Contact, which you probably don't have because it's a third-party thing, and I load up a bunch of libraries, it takes samples that are stored somewhere on my computer and plays them back. And this can run RAM up a lot. But because I have a much better computer, it can handle that. But it'll be reflected here in this bar. So real quick, to clarify just a little bit, when this space fills up with stuff, it says no. So let's say you've clicked a whole bunch of stuff and you get 100 and FL Studios is crackling and just making all these gross sounds. Well, what it's doing is you filled up the space that you've said take this amount of time to come to process this. And as a result, it's over full. So it starts clicking, it's cutting, it's choosing and picking what it's going to process, whatever comes in there. And so you need to change this to be bigger. And you can do this various ways. You'd click on this. I'm not going to because I'm recording right now, but you'd click on it and you change the buffer length, the buffer size of how long you want that gap to be. So if you have a bigger buffer size, so a longer time to process, you'll get less clicks. But if you push keys on a MIDI controller, you'll get a bigger gap. And that's why you want a USB audio interface, because it essentially replaces the sound card in your computer and has way more, it's specifically built for that purpose. And that's why you'd want that. It's just better, it does the job better. So anyways, that's a quick speech, because crackles like that can be very annoying at first, especially if you don't know what's causing them. Besides that, that's pretty much all you need to worry about for the global control. So if you have any questions, drop them in the comments, subscribe, and share this video with someone if you find it useful. Find someone else who would find it useful, and we could get some sort of chain mail of positive sharing going on. I don't know. Check out my music on composinggloves.com. I've got free sample packs and things that you can add to your collection, and as well as presets if you're a massive owner. I'm looking at doing harmless and harmer presets pretty soon too, but I don't know. Maybe I won't. Other than that, have a blessed day.